Thank you very much for all coming to the session. What we're going to do is I'm just going to set the stage for what the session will entail. Then I'll be introducing the distinguished speakers that we have with us today. And then we'll go ahead and open it up to questions for about half the session or so. So once again, we're here for the Islamic Philanthropy session. The undertext is the problem eradication philosophy. A lot of you may be wondering, what do we mean by problem eradication? The concept of philanthropy is, of course, to alleviate or support pressing needs that will not get capital or time or resources otherwise. And when it comes to problem eradication, I think the combination of that philosophy and philanthropy are particularly strong. Being able to leverage strategically and through coordinated ways to solve pressing issues over an extended period of time is something that is both within the ethos of Islamic philanthropy and something that is the need of the hour today. And we see an example with this through the Sustainable Development Goals and before that with the Millennium Development Goals around setting coordinated global targets and then being able to systematically ease the conditions or create a better standard for various issues across sectors. Today our focus will be on this in two ways. And we'll be talking, number one, about what are mechanisms to coordinate Islamic philanthropy at a global and regional level, leveraging governments, multilaterals, charities, and startups. And secondly, the role of public institutions in the Islamic economy. Why is it important to have public goods, public institutions by the people, for the people, in a way that will help augment philanthropy? So without any further delay, I just want to first of all introduce everybody on the panel, and then we'll hear a quick introduction, and then we'll get right into the subject matter. So starting on my right with Kimberly Geyer. She is a philanthropist working with many multilaterals around the world, and has done a lot of good work with women around the world as well, in particular. Sitting next to her is Hossam Shaheen. He's the head of partnerships for UNHCR. And he'll be talking about some of the great initiatives that they've been able to do, both at the global and regional level as well. On his right is Dr. Tariq Chima. Needs no introduction. He's the founder and head of the World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists and the Global Donors Forum. Has been at the forefront of talking about Muslim philanthropy across the world. And finally, Rashid Uwaish, who is we joked about this before the session. He's an investor. He's not a philanthropist. So we'll hear about why it's important not to give. No, I'm just kidding. He will talk about philanthropy from an investor's perspective.
I take money, that's it.
But he's a distinguished investor, has worked with many sovereign wealth funds. And when we talk about a global coordinated role for philanthropy, it's good to hear from people on the other side of the table. So without any further delay, Kimberly, you can give a quick 2-minute introduction about your work, and we can go on.
I'm Kimberly Geyer. I'm a former banker, now turned philanthropist, in particular with a focus on women's giving. I have worked, I guess, on both sides. From the banking side, structuring financial products for banks has now translated into how can we take that skill set and actually apply some of those skills in innovative finance to humanitarian issues. So I've worked with the International Committee of the Red Cross on the first humanitarian impact bond and a particular role in that. But increasingly trying to create a space for collaboration to bring investors and philanthropists, tech, multilaterals, and humanitarians together to solve some of these intractable problems and actually get to them before they become problems. The problem eradication philosophy is what drew me to this session, and in particular I'll be talking about a new mechanism to eradicate famine by getting in front of famine and investing earlier through smart technology, including AI and other mechanisms that really can turn the needle now to getting in front of these problems before they become a disaster.
Hossam Shaheen, I work for UNHCR. At UNHCR we take care of refugees all around the world. What we're trying to do is really to open up the conversation and the dialogue on Islamic philanthropy, on Islamic social finance. Taking this another step down, we tried to work on Zakat initiative. I'm going to talk about this more and more as we go through the conversation. But maybe what I want to say is really there are three aspects of this that we would like to focus on. Is really the giving part, of course, when it comes to Muslims giving their zakat through a UN agency, and that might look a little bit maybe strange or interesting or maybe good. So that's something I would like to hear from the audience about as well. What do they think about that? The other part is transparency when it comes to Islamic giving. Part of the study that we had and we read about that zakat in the world is between 200 billion and 300 billion. There's a huge gap of data. We don't know where that is. So why the estimation is so huge? How we can together in coalition, and I know this is part of discussion about collaboration and how we put things together when it comes to Islamic philanthropy. So how we can close the data gap and how we can take this to more transparency and effectiveness and impact perspectives. So saying all of this, I'm very passionate with a very passionate team to take what the UN does from a UNHCR perspective locally. So we're trying to do is, we work in the hosting countries from Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, a lot of places, and we're trying to take this brand from a UN, New York, Geneva perspective to what do we do on the ground, why it matters to connect more and more to Muslim givers, to beneficiaries from all around the world, and how we make this connection through technology, again, transparency, and in partnerships with all of you, investors, philanthropists, and specialists in the philanthropy area. Thank you.
And just before Dr. Tarek, the data gap, I just want to mention one point to really further Hussam's point. The projected numbers for zakat on any given year is between 232 billion to 560 billion per year. This is between studies by the UN, Islamic Development Bank, and the World Bank. So it's a big gap, but it's actually a gap that Dr. Tarek has done a lot of work on in terms of being able to figure out who are the players that can actually give us this data as well. But go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. I'm Tarek Chima, representing World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists. This year we are celebrating the 10th year of our formation, and which was in recent time, first structured effort to make Muslim giving more effective and accountable. And I think our main aim is to lead that shift from spontaneous giving to a more strategic giving. And not just spending our charitable giving towards firefighting, but actually investing in the people and making sure that we can gradually take them out of the state of dependence. So that's the kind of work we're doing. And as Rafi mentioned, of course, it involves a lot of work at multiple levels. You have to be working with a number of partners. You have to also look into the research and innovation and also the data. So we can perhaps talk more later.
And I think fundamental to that data gap with information is also technology to be able to harvest that. I think that's Rashid, that's one of your focuses as well.
Yeah, that's right. I started my career as an investment and finance specialist, and very quickly, went to technology, trying to find a way to make those finance processes efficient. And then on a personal basis, I started investing in startups and technology that strive to make people more financially literate on education, etc. But as well as because people entrust money with me, so I'm the trust agent. And I always believe that even in philanthropy and donation, technology should be able to help people to trust more easily when they're donating, because that would then have exponential effect on their donation as well. So that's what we're trying to do with different initiatives, working with great people who have the networks to make this technology useful to the bigger number.
Fantastic. So I think when we talk about building Islamic philanthropy for the future, we talk about the two running themes of our talk today around global coordination and building strong public institutions. And I refrain from using the word nonprofit because I don't think it gives enough weight. It's really public institutions that are built with the purpose of the problem eradication philosophy, not for profit maximization, not for shareholder value, but with a clear, defined mandate that's driven by the people for the people. But the first step to that is, of course, getting an inclusive voice, getting the right stakeholders to the table, And of course, one of the primary aspects of that is the inclusion of women in that conversation. And Kimberly, maybe you can walk us through some of the work that you're doing on that front.
Yep. Well, I guess I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about the famine mechanism. Yes. So this is a project, and it's a good example of it's not any one NGO, it's not any one multilateral, and it's not any one philanthropist. And in fact, there's a big, interesting tech component to this. So after the famine threat in 2011, when actually 250,000 people died as a result of that food insecurity. And the lessons learned from that are that people do respond, and very generously, including in this region, but it's often too late. You know, the warnings are put out over and over again, and finally when pictures of literally starving children and people are put on television, the money flows. But by the time the appeal goes out and the money comes in, it's actually way too far down the line. So learning from those lessons, you know, how can we use technology? How can we use the data in new ways through artificial intelligence, through machine learning, through forecasts of weather and movement and conflict? How can we get in front of that? And this platform, which is a coalition of all these different institutions, involves tech with Google, Microsoft, and Amazon at the table. It involves new technologies in finance, so looking at how reinsurance or new triggers based on that data could actually trigger some transfer of risk to the private sector. And most importantly, and I think this is a very important point with Islamic philanthropy, is how can we invest in those communities in the first place so that they're more resilient? You know, often the deaths that come from famine are actually from the disease that hits when people are weak. And so if you're not investing in the basics of what we would usually call development, wash systems, water infrastructure, access to health, and the basics of agriculture and livestock resilience as well, then these things don't need to happen. And there is a need for all of us to work together to move that philanthropic capital upstream, which actually has an impact on the economy in the long run, let alone the important lives that we're saving. You know, for every child that goes through a famine, they lose up to 2 centimeters off their height, 6 months off of schooling, and their lifetime income decreases by an average of 13%. If we had gotten in front of this famine in Somalia, the impact of the wasted money on aid that could have been saved through the lives and the investment early was $53 million, according to the study that was done. So that's real money and real lives. And we can all work together to sit at the table. And in particular, I'd like to invite philanthropists to get involved up front to see how, what is the best return on your dollar. And if you look at someone through the example of the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates looked at what they could use their money for early in vaccines. For every dollar that's put into that, you can see exactly where that's translating in terms of the economic reality of vaccinating a child. And the same philosophy goes for food security. And I think that women and men have a role to play in that.
And I think that's a great example of solid collaboration and development. And when it comes on the other side of raising those funds and empowering these sorts of platforms, the work that you guys have been doing.
So I think it all started with the need, right? So you have a problem, you wanna finish the problem in a way, or try to affect in a positive way what's happening on the ground. Our region, MENA region, is one of the highest, or maybe the highest export and host of refugees in the world. Worldwide, you have 65.8 million displaced people. 24 million out of that are refugees. More than 40% of this are based here in the region. You have countries like Lebanon, Jordan, and other very generous countries are hosting refugees, but with a lot of economic problem. What you want to do is really try to help refugee families. At the same time, try to help the hosting communities, which is something that is happening through the OIC countries, especially from the Gulf countries in the UAE, for example. There are a lot of support of that from a governmental level. But then what you want to do as well is try to engage the public. You want to talk to individuals who are really interested to go through technology platforms and choose to give their donations in the way they trust to the authority they trust when it comes to humanitarian support. So Definitely, when it comes to coalitions, to partnerships, it's really important. But maybe where you want to start as well is engaging the public. So maybe the coalition that we're trying to do more and more is about working in partnerships with people, so they can vote for a specific cause through their dirham, riyal, etc. Under the rules and regulations. But at the same time, this is where the change happens. And this is where you can later on work with higher donors when it comes to the value of donations, philanthropists, because you have the base of support. Through the zakat program, Zakati for Refugees, is what we're trying to do is engage Muslims, specifically from this part of the world, so they can be part of solving a problem. And this problem we talk about is about the displacement, is about helping the hosting communities as well. One example, very quick example, what we're doing in Jordan with colleagues in Jordan and partners, banks and even scholars. We're trying to support the cash, the cash-based intervention program through zakat directly. So if you pay through and you calculate your zakat on our calculator online, you pay your zakat directly. The refugee will have a text message saying, "Go collect your zakat." Donation or the sum that you receive every month. You go to the ATM, you iris scan, and then you receive your donation. And that's with zero sum of fraud, of repeating the donation in a way or another, and very, very small risk factor. In this way, I think you're bringing the banking sector, you're bringing scholars from the Muslim communities who are willing to do something good with international partners as well, and at the same time you're bringing money to the host community through international donors. Muzakin can be coming from the States, from the UK, etc. So I think this is the 360 kind of approach on where you can have partners from the public sector, governments, banks, and philanthropists.
Let me ask you on this. In this 360 approach, with your zakat platform, where have you faced the most resistance? From which side of this circle? Is it the banking sector? Is it the government? Is it the development partners that you have? Where does most resistance come from, and how can we overcome that resistance?
That's a very good question, actually, Rafi. I think it starts with our internal understanding of what it means for a UN agency to ask for zakat. And this is the first layer of challenges, because we have to do a lot of works with colleagues and try to do internal awareness on, oh yes, we might be able as a UN agency, even though we're not a Muslim charity,
yes,
to take zakat and deliver it to those who are in need and eligible to receive it. This is one. The other part, it was about the awareness to the public that this is why we are eligible to do that. And of course, in the middle, it was about working with the scholars, with our partners, in this case, Taba Foundation, and working with the media to send the message that we have 5 fatwas, this is what we can do, and these are the conditions. This is the M&E conditions that we're trying to follow. But still, the continuous challenge, I would say, is continuous trust, building more trust with that system, and it works. And not compete. Actually, we would like more international organizations to go that way, because when you open the conversation that yes, international organization can take zakat, this is where it opens up to bigger segments of the public.
That's great. I mean, I think zakat is, of course, one of the preeminent buzzwords in the development field today. Dr. Targum, you've heard, complaints, praises, everything on this word. What do you see today? What are we trending? Is there more coordinated usage of zakat today? How is the awareness?
I will take a minute to take a step back and go to the title of this conversation. When we talk about the Islamic philanthropy and its potential for problem eradication, I think it is important that we are honest and we are courageous enough to first understand what are the fault lines or what are the shortcomings that we have within our Muslim giving. The fact is established that we are very generous in giving. The giving runs in billions of dollars. Perhaps it is trillion or more, when you put all other giving which is non-documented or non-zakat as well. And if you add the time and everything that we volunteer, I think it is not only just 1/4 the world's population, but many of the Muslim societies have proven to be giving more money when from the perspective of the percentage of their GDP. But when you run the test of impact, I think we are far behind. It is good to know, yes, we are very generous, but am I really bringing the change which is aligned to the amount of money I give? And I think that is where
Is that a behavioral issue or is that a structural issue?
Yeah, I think there are multiple challenges, and I just wrote down 5 things. And the first is data, you have already talked about. I mean, if you do not have the proper navigational support, obviously you will not guarantee that you will reach to the destination, right? The second thing is the overwhelming majority of Muslim giving is used for firefighting. Either we are dealing with the man-made disasters or the natural disasters, or we are giving money out of our piety in a very casual way. And I always say that Muslim, when they give faith-based giving, they tend to become very humble, but at the same time they spoil the recipients as well. Because they think it is the necessity of the piety that you have to be very humble, very low profile, but we miss the point that we have to make sure that this is an investment in the people, and we want to make sure that we get a good or maximum social ROI on that, right? So it's all about smart giving. And I always say that we have to also shift from faith-based to faith-inspired, which really means that we have to go out, reach to destitute, irrespective of race, faith, color, and whatnot, and make sure that if they are in need and we can help, we must help them, right? The other thing is that if you look at the Muslim world, 57 OIC countries, unfortunately, there is a big governance gap. So if you look at social services and social safety nets, there is a huge gap that is, rooted out of the poor governance. And what happened is then the philanthropic money comes in and they try to, fill the gap that is created by the state. And that is a huge gap. You can only do it to a temporary, but you cannot make it the roadmap for the philanthropy. So I think the Muslim societies are losing big way when it comes to investing in their futures, building the capacity of their people, be it for economic generation, be it for the intellectual development, be it the other cultural and heritage things, which of course, if you do not have all those, soft, what I call as the subjects or disciplines, obviously there will be a mass dissatisfaction and rage, and we all know what sort of problems we are facing. And then lastly, there is also poor coordination between the various Muslim giving outfits. So until and unless we improve the coordination, I think the impact issue will remain a big time. So when we say about this problem solving or the problem eradication potential of Muslim giving, we have to first make sure that we do a good diagnostics and we take steps to improve that. And I'm sure that with the amount of money we have, we can definitely make a huge impact.
That's great. I mean, from what I'm hearing, there's a governance issue. Can we make our philanthropists more impact-minded? Rashid, what I want to ask you is, how can we use technology to nudge behavior in the right direction when it comes to Islamic philanthropy?
So, yeah, maybe back to your introduction of what I do. So I think that the objective should be the eradication of the word philanthropy, in the sense that we should not need philanthropists to be like a job. It's everyone's responsibility. And in today's world, and I'm very interested in this technology that is called blockchain, because this introduces the idea that at some point we could be able to really enter into a trustless environment, i.e. we wouldn't need the United Nations to be there between us and the people who need that money. And I think it sounds like utopian, but we're getting closer and closer to that. So we will always need someone to give us advice on who should be receiving something, who is really in need and who is faking that need, for example, pretending. But this doesn't mean, for example, that our money has to flow through the bank accounts of big institutions. So, and this is not to point the finger at any of the institution, but that works as well in the investment sector, and that's what's happening today. So basically the role of technology should be there to help us match the donors and the receivers without intermediaries as much as we can. This allows to remove all that friction that is currently there, because if you look at the administrative costs for all those big organizations that are there to, bring that money to the people in need, we should be able to use technology to reduce that cost dramatically, reduce it to the minimum possible.
You guys did a research with the University of Luxembourg on
Yeah,
zakat and blockchain.
Exactly.
What was the finding of that?
So zakat, we started as everyone testing the blockchain existing in the market. And for example, they talk about Ethereum blockchain. And we realized that it was not the right blockchain just because it costs too much money. So because you use a currency that is fluctuating, so it cost a lot of money. So we tried to find a way to make it much more efficient. And that's, I think, how institutions should be measured. So how much are they spending? And I think some organization, they give the operational cost compared to the amount they receive. When they are at 5-6%, it's very good. But some of them are at 30, 40, 50%. And that's what technology should help remove. That's what we're doing on a daily basis, trying to find a solution. We started with zakat, how to allocate zakat, although our perspective is from the investment, but how to allocate zakat the most directly possible to the end receiver.
Fantastic. I mean, and that's a great way of connecting, retail to development institutions to all work together. Now, before I open up to the floor for questions, I want to take a quick survey of the panelists with a question I haven't asked anybody yet. And I just want, it's going to be option A, B, and C. I just want you to pick one and give you one line why, and we'll move on. And that's, when it comes to Islamic philanthropy, what I think, a question that we were discussing last night with another gathering is, I think there are three factions. There's the public sector, there are governments. There's the private sector, mainly leading with Islamic banking and finance. And then there's the people, the givers themselves. Which one of these factions, in your opinion, is the one lagging behind in the mindset and the data gap and everything that we talked about today the most? And what needs to be done to jumpstart one of these factions? So you have public, private, and people. Which one's lagging behind the most? And how can, what needs to be done to jumpstart that particular faction?
I'll start because I'm an eternal optimist. I don't think anybody is lagging. I think actually this is a really exciting time because everyone is leaning in and is ready to collaborate. And so by pulling everybody together almost at the same speed, I don't think we have to have anybody lagging at this point. And I am very optimistic. One of the things that sparked my memory from what you were just saying about efficiency is in the famine project, for example, there will be pre-agreed financing and lessons that we can take from the financial world on how to be more efficient, lining things up and putting supplies in place ahead of time so that you don't have everybody putting up their hand for an appeal and the private donor doesn't know which one to give it to. You can actually have sort of the experts already deciding, okay, this organization has access, can do this very well, we need X amount of money for them, and we're going to sign that up ahead of a crisis so that when the crisis hits, we don't have to wait 6 months for an appeal to come in. The money is pre-agreed like it would be on your own line of credit, and we can move and act efficiently. So I think that we can all lean in and not lag would be my advice.
No, I think three categories will need to do a lot of work, including the public. From a government perspective, I think there's a big gap when it comes to policies and how you implement these policies, including startups on blockchains, etc. So how do you do that? And this is, I think, still the work of governments when it comes to protecting people and protecting the directions of zakat, of Islamic philanthropy, in a way or another. And maybe I don't want to use the protecting part, yes, but laws and regulations are really important when it comes to not to let things go too much to the left. On the other side, I think businesses are lagging really behind when it comes to their CSR programs, and I've been doing this job for some time now, and we see a little bit of advancement when it comes to linking CSR to philanthropy or to impact. It's happening, but it's very, very slow. And I think, and in that part, we need the humility part, I think, and that's my own perspective of that when it comes to businesses. But then to the public, I think, definitely people are trying to give directly for a long time, and they are trying to give their local mosques, and that's the local blockchain, I think. But then when it comes to transparency and to make sure that where your money is going, how do you report back through your local mosque or through blockchain that is very democratic, great, but how do you know that your dollar, your real, your dirham went to the right place, to the right hand, and is not being used in the wrong way? UNHCR was supposed to close after 3 years, 68 years ago, but just because of the war going on, unfortunately we're being renewed. So you will always need those big bodies to do something, but I really hope to close tomorrow if the problems are eradicated.
I echo the sentiments of both of my colleagues here, but I believe that the private, public, and philanthropic sectors, their convergence is extremely important in a limited spaces, not a comprehensive sense. And technology, I assume, is the most potent enabler for moving forward, because not only it will enhance the outreach, which it is very difficult to reach a lot of people and masses in every part of the world conventional way. It will reduce the cost of delivery, which you have already mentioned, and it will also enhance the transparency and the effectiveness of that. So, but my last point is that, like it happens every time there's a new technology, it is perceived as a profitable business opportunity. And if we are successful to perceive it as the viable service opportunity, which means it is business viable, but it is not perhaps maximize your profits, then I think we are successful. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Well, for me, it's the opposite. I'm eternally skeptical, but with a lot of hope, right?
Good.
With a lot of hope. So I think we're all lagging behind. Otherwise, there would not be so many people in need, right? But I think, I mean, there is more consciousness towards the needs of other people all around the world. I mean, everything now is global. Everything is on social media. People are aware that things are going wrong at some place in the world. So I think more and more we will be able to connect to people who are more in need than the ones close to our house, for example. Sometimes everyone will need to receive, but it will be easier for people to allocate money to situations that they care about. So I think that is on a positive note.
Great. I think we have 15 minutes left for questions. So if anyone has anything to ask, feel free.
Mike. No worries.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just now, based on what I have heard from you all, I think to eradicate poverty is little backward. So directly funding, you have to directly fund when major crisis happens. Before that, there are other issues which are contributing to this poverty. One is family issues. There's a lot of conflict between the families that needs to be looked at. More funding should be given to civil societies so that they promote a better family and medical systems, legal issues within the families, and a lot of money is spent on that. And a lot of them, many of them end up selling their properties and land just to meet the legal conflicts. Recently, United Nations SDG, they put everything, but they have not come in with in order to eliminate poverty. They have not talked about the arms. Arms supply is not in their SDGs proposal. They are trying to, and that's one of the major reasons. Iraq was not a poor country, and many other countries which are in war, they were not poor. Now they are. Thank you.
We'll take 2 more questions and then we'll let the panelists answer. Yes.
Okay, I have a question for you, if you could hear me now.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Shakil. So the question is that in United Nations Zakat, the thing that you just suggested, there's so much emphasis on collecting Zakat and investing it to wherever it is. My question is, how do you prioritize which project or which community gets to at the top of the priority, or it is dictated by the donators? So if you could
Want to take
elaborate.
one more question from maybe somewhere?
There is
Go ahead.
Hello. My question is, which do you think is the single biggest problem that can be solved using technology for zakat? Which do you think is the single biggest problem related to zakat that can be solved by technology?
To me, the biggest problem that this can solve is trust. So really, the biggest, even on a personal basis, and I see that around me as well. When you give, so you always have this. If you don't give yourself to the hand of the one in need, you're not sure your money is getting exactly where it should get, and by the time it should get. Usually, it's not real time. I think blockchain can allow real time donation at some point, coupled with other technologies. So blockchain by itself is no magic stick. It needs to be a comprehensive solution, but this is one of the biggest problems that it can solve.
Yeah, so regarding the prioritization of how we distribute zakat, and our core mandate is protection. So what we do as UNHCR is register people when they flee from their countries and they choose to register with UNHCR as refugees. Part of that process is interviewing people and make sure families we know the status of the family, the economic situation, the challenges, etc. And accordingly, with the big data and a lot of analysis, we put like this 20,000 families, for example, or 30,000 families are the priority for winter this year, for example, as it's happening now. And we have around 1 million person in Jordan and Lebanon who are in dear need for support in Jordan and Lebanon for winter. So this is how we do it. It's a lot of field work and colleagues who are mainly lawyers and know how to interview people to do that.
Maybe two more questions.
Yes. Please. Yeah, we are seeing that there are a lot of donations that are going to respond to specific crises. However, we can see investment in long-term projects and sustainable projects. We need urgently to end poverty and to end hunger in the world. And I believe that we have the tools, the technology, and also if we join efforts between private, public, and UN agencies, we are able to end these issues, these problems. So let's start now. Let's build something. Let's start this platform and work together. We can do it. So, yeah. What?
I was about to raise the same point. So that's an excellent statement on her behalf. I think that we always will have to respond to humanitarian crises as they happen. The immediate needs of food, hunger, water, shelter. Those always should be dealt with. But at the same time, starting to invest in long-term resilience through education, through food security, through skills and livelihoods that are going to make these families and communities resilient to shocks. That is where I think that we need to shift the mindset that it's not just the urgent humanitarian need of food drops and water trucking. It's actually investing in these communities in education, and particularly girls' education is one of the most resilient forms of investment that you can make with your philanthropic dollars. So I think creating these platforms and having these conversations in this region would be, at the local level, at the regional level, and at the global level. I encourage everybody to ask any one of us how you can get involved in those conversations, because the long-term resilience to these shocks is going to come from these investments now.
Thanks very much. My name's Peter. I live in this innovative financing space. I was fascinated you're using zakat within the investment ecosystem. Do I understand that you're sort of layering it and you're using the zakat as more of the blended, the grant elements, or what happens to the returnable capital here?
No, I'm not doing that. I have different hats, one on the investment side, but I'm using my knowledge of finance, and technology to make the zakat process a bit more efficient. That's all I was saying. So what to do with zakat? I'm not a scholar. I'm not going to debate on that, and I think there are a lot of different opinions. But definitely, it should be put to good use. Can it be invested? This is a question I can't answer.
And
I wouldn't answer it.
I think we also have to start to really narrow in on what we mean by impact investment. There's a lot of different meanings to that term in different people's minds, and I'd like to actually coin a version of it, which is philanthropic impact investment. So it doesn't have to be an impact bond necessarily to be an impact investment. So the number I quoted of the $53 million in humanitarian aid that was spent, when if that $53 million had been invested in resilience and upfront projects, would multiply many times beyond sort of some of the tools that we see, which are equally important in different ways. But I think in the philanthropic community, we still have a lot to do that can be done with straight philanthropic investment beyond sort of what you would do with your investment portfolio.
Dr. do you have any sentiments?
First of all, zakat is not a charity. Zakat is not something that I'm willfully just helping somebody. It is their right. It is something that if it is with me, it's a liability. It has to be given to the person who is in need. But then what happened is the recipients, the qualified recipients, are often either have a lack of education or they do not have the functional or financial literacy that they need. And I think if anything that can be done is that while we give them their money, we also empower them with some sort of tools and education that they can make a better use of that money. Because if they are going to use and spend that money in a smart way, there is a hope they will be graduate from the poverty. But so far, it is a very inefficient way of giving that we have made people literally beggars. They rely upon our zakat year by year by year. And I think that is the fundamental challenge. It's not about the zakat, it's not about the size of zakat or the importance or potency of the zakat. It's the way it is managed, it is perceived, it is given. So if technology and any other financial experts can actually put in their acumen and make it a more informed, smart way of disbursement, I think that will revolutionize it.
Great. We'll just get closing remarks as we're running out of time. Rashid, we'll start from you this side.
No, I think it was perfect ending to this discussion. I fully agree with that.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, one more. Okay, go ahead.
The closing remark is up there.
Yes.
Umar Saeed from Pakistan. A lot of discussion about zakat. I think that in developing countries, Muslim developing countries, the most of this zakat is not documented. Just like Mr. Tariq has, that the need of the hour is that should be documented, and the recipient should be empowered so that anybody can give to anybody. So this is the very distributed ledgers. So in my opinion, that should be documented, and then it will be more efficiently used.
Maybe one more question. Yes.
So a lot of people spoke about target money, and a lot of people who actually receive money. But one of the problems with any sustainable projects or trying to sustain any form of solution. Now you can hear me. So I was saying a lot of people were focusing on the donors. There are quite a lot of people who are doing good, and zakah is, it's a must, like it's mandatory for Muslims. And a lot of people were also speaking about the recipients, but not the middle people who actually make the project sustainable. I would like to know if there is a proper investment in the human capital of people who actually deliver, sustain these projects, and also who advise continuously. So, for example, if you were talking about food security, I'm a scientist in this field. So you're talking about food security. If people actually understand the life cycle process and the food production process, they can, if you have experts on your panel or advisory people, or where there's an investment in the human capital, you can actually reduce the cost. You could make it actually sustainable for somebody who's investing in it, because the production line has quite a lot of waste that can be traded in its own right as a resource instead of money. And blockchain can help do the resource allocation, because the technology can actually tell you, for example, where the production line is now at its end cycle. You can then donate it to others through the blockchain channel. The algorithm, a simple computational algorithm, in about 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes, can do the delivery, and there's no wastage of neither the product, and the recipient is always coming in. So I'd like to know, where's the human capital? Because it's, we don't want people to just, take fish. They need to know how to fish. But you need also people to tell them what's the best way and what's the latest technology and how to actually put it through. And it's not financially feasible for people to normally come out of executive jobs and better paying jobs, because unfortunately there's no investment in the people who make the projects feasible for the end user.
I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I think the message is on point. Investing in human capital, I think that's why we're all here today. And I hope that everyone can take something with them back from this, invest their time in some of these activities that we talked about. Thank you very much. I'm being told then. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Done?
Yeah.
We're done?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.